I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
I guess the first thing I think about is how fast it's gone by. 52 years is a long time, obviously. But it just seems like it's been one continuous journey. I came out here one day and talked to Colonel Lynn, and I passed the first interview, and I came out a second time, and I passed the second interview, and the third interview, I don't know whether I passed or not, but apparently he hired me. He was in a hurry because he was going to get married that afternoon. So I don't know if he remembers hiring me or not.
It was to be a place that he could go and teach a couple of years. And then we'd go on to either law school or some sort of graduate work, and then decide after that where we wanted to be.
The basketball job became available, and I've been here ever since.
He was not someone who was a coach who, in addition, taught a few classes. He was a teacher who also happened to be a very successful basketball coach and track coach.
One time I may have said something that led him to think that I didn't take him seriously as a teacher or an academician. And he came in when I was collating and stapling my test and picked up a copy of it and went through all 100 multiple choice questions and answered them correctly. And I had just made the test out, and I'm not sure I could have answered them all correctly.
When I think of Coach Peters, I think of a kind of a iconic figure. When I was playing for him, I thought of him and John Wooden in the same context.
When I think of Coach Peters, I actually think of family dinners, because there's hardly a family dinner that our three boys and my husband, who played basketball himself, we don't spend time on Coach Peters' stories.
I think that when you think about Coach Peters, the sustained success that he had, one state championship in all those years, some people may say, gosh, that's not many for all those years, but the sustained success that all of his teams had, to me, means far more than how many state championships a school earned.
When I think of Coach, I think of prepared. I felt like in every game we went into, we knew exactly what the other team was going to do, and I just remember giving you a great sense of confidence when he would tell you exactly the plays they're going to run, and we'd go out on the court and they would run exactly what he told us they were going to do. And
there's nothing like preparation that breeds confidence. You know, it's just, if you come in prepared, then whether it's business or schoolwork or whatever it is in life, then your confidence level rises and you perform better. That was definitely something that was at the top of the list.
Coach Peters understood that most games were won before the opening tip-off rather than after. So he prepared teams as a result of conditioning and scouting reports, and you always went into a game thinking you had an advantage, and it was always an advantage to think you had an advantage.
He always had his team prepared, as well prepared as any high school team you'll ever see.
Our hallmark was doing well against teams that were actually more talented than we were, and we would routinely, through discipline and I think smarts and hard work, wear down teams that sometimes were better than we were.
It's a 5 or 10 point advantage just having Coach Peters on the bench.
You don't become as successful as Dad has without being very competitive.
He was a quiet competitor, but he didn't look like it, but he was a very, very intense competitor.
You know, Coach many times talked about one thing that has stuck with me is the essence of sports is execution under pressure. And Coach prepared us, and but then we had to play the game.
He never spoke about wins. He just always focused about executing under pressure, being mentally tough.
He would change his offense and defense to fit what each team thought they were good at, and I thought it helped him adapt to whatever players he got. Some years he had a bunch of short people, some years he had good athletes, and he was able to create a system for each of those different types of teams, and it helped him win lots of games.
No player was any more important than another player, and our clumsiest player in the 10th grade was Tom Verdeja, who couldn't jump over a bench or a coat case and almost not over a painted line on the floor. So we started working with him on the painted line.
Never sneered, never mocked. I was perhaps as unathletic as anyone to play for Coach Peters, but he found me something I could do. He took as much care with me as he did with those who were clearly excellent athletes.
His philosophy of coaching was fundamentals, basics, so he was very concerned about attention to detail and doing those details exactly right.
He approaches coaching, I would say, like a classroom. He's a magnificent teacher. I'd say he's a teacher of the game. So the practices are more like classroom, like taking classes, and the games are kind of like exams.
He never thought he knew everything. He was always trying to learn. He was always reading books, always watching other teams, trying to learn, because he knew we can all get better.
It was always his approach to everything, and he always had a smile somewhere behind. Even if he wasn't smiling, you knew he was smiling.
He was all about effort, and if it wasn't there, he was going to tell it to them like it was.
He expected class out of his kids, and he certainly epitomized that. He is the epitome of what a high school coach should be.
I always admired his character, his organization, his strength of purpose, his ability to lead without yelling at people necessarily, but giving them a reason to do something.
One of my favorite things he said to me was, if I can't count on you to do the little things, then how am I going to count on you to do the big things?
The rules off the court were just as important as the rules on the court. You know, being on time, wearing your headpiece, having socks on.
He would show us how to put on our uniforms. He would go through and have one player stand up and show all the team in what order you're supposed to put on the jersey and the shorts and everything.
I wanted the players to be held accountable for almost everything they did. I felt like this was teaching discipline, and this is something that was necessary in their development.
He had a rule that you had to go home, you had to shower after practice, and you had to wear a hat. You had to cover your head before you went home. And so Scott and I left practice one day without doing that.
And I remember sitting at home, Mom answered the phone and said, it's Coach Peters telling you, it's time to come back. You got to come back up. And I said, for what? And she said, you didn't take a shower. I had to drive all the way back up, and I wasn't real happy about it. We kind of laughed about it and did it and went home. Never left without taking a shower again, though.
And it's a good lesson, right? That, hey, look, the rules apply to everyone. Scott and David were stars of the team, and no one was better than the rules or could escape the rules.
If the small things were done correctly, if players were in the right position, if uniforms were folded a certain way, if equipment was organized a certain way, if all those things were done correctly, then the big things would take care of themselves.
And collectively, you put all of those together, and we learned to play with each other and trust each other, and we became bigger than a bunch of individuals. We became a team.
I was a sophomore. It was my first year to play basketball, and I went on a church ski trip in the middle of the season. And I was a starter before that ski trip. When I came back, I think I was last guy on the bench. It took me a couple of games to get my starting job back. So what he was trying to tell me was, you made an obligation to the team. Team comes first, and you need to fulfill that obligation. And it was things like that. Just that's how he ran the ship, and you were going to fall in line.
Coach Peters used to talk about mental toughness, and when he wanted to demonstrate that point, we did something called the potty drill. And you'd stand, you would literally lean up against the wall, legs perpendicular to the floor with your arms out.
This was excruciating, and he would always say, we're going to do it for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And he had his stopwatch, as he always did, and when clearly the time stated had passed and people were complaining, he would always say, well, we're going to do a little bit of extra, as he would say. And if someone continued to complain, he would always say, quit your bitching.
As we sit here and do this, and I'm looking over my shoulder and I say, excellence is a habit's on the wall in this locker room. And that's not by chance. That's the way Jerry expected it to be. He wanted everything to be done the proper way and done the way he wanted to do.
But at the end of the day, it was all about fundamentals and basics and values. He had a very simple concept, and he was a very strong proponent of a great work ethic.
He just wants to help kids get better. That's why he does what he does. And I believe he has a real heart for young people. And I think he knows that coaching and teaching give him a great platform to help kids grow into better people.
When people find out I played basketball, they always ask me, hey, were you any good? And my answer is always, I was the best that I could be, not only as a basketball player, but as a person, because Coach Peters only accepted that from his players, including me.
The fact that now, today, so many, all of really his former players, still love him to death, and the influence he had on all of those people. Despite all of Jerry's demands and his do's and his don'ts, it took.
Coaching is just like parenting, effectively. You have kids for 2 or 3 hours literally every day, especially if you're committed to a sport. And the way I describe him is a consummate teacher. And teaching entails a lot of different things. One is having some rules and regulations and kind of structure around it. Number 2, you have to be committed, and you've got to be disciplined about it, and you've got to be very organized. And he was all of the above.
Back in the day when we were practicing, if we had a snow day, Jerry would get it in his car and go down Poplar down to McLean, where we had some guys live, and he wouldn't leave Poplar, but he said, all you guys can get to Poplar and I'm picking you all up. So he'd come down Poplar and stop wherever the closest intersection was with your street and pick us up. And we'd go to practice, but I swear I don't know how we got home.
A patient of mine a few years back used to coach at Collierville. We were talking, he knew I'd played at MUS, and he asked me, he says, did you play for Coach Peters? I go, yes. He says, well, he's still coaching, isn't he? I said, yes. He said, let me see if I've got this right. Still a bunch of average basketball players that keep the game close until the fourth quarter and then beat you with free throws. I said, yeah, that's still going on. And he kind of laughed approvingly, and you see, well, it's a good formula and it works.
But he loved it, and this is what he enjoyed doing every day. And it's like in life, if you find something you love doing, then it's not really work. If I were truthful deep down, this is what I always wanted to do.
Coach Peters and I go way back, a long way before MUS. We actually went to Valentine Elementary, Snowden Junior High School, Central High School, and Rhodes College Southwestern at Memphis together. So I've known him a long time.
With Ruth, you got the total package. You got Coach Peters, who was all of those things, a great coach, mentor, friend. Then you got Ruth, too, and she was an encourager and a very positive influence. So it was a good 1-2 combination.
The beautiful part of Ruth is she made us feel like our boys were her boys, too. Mm-hmm. She treated them like they were her sons and cared about them like they were her sons.
It may sound a little corny, but they say a train is no good without its tracks. And one small glitch in the system and the train is derailed. My mother's been that set of tracks for my dad. She's always been his biggest fan and still is.
Since 1960, I have missed 2 basketball games, and I was not happy about that at all.
I mean, I don't know many players who didn't miss at least 2 games, but she's a soulmate for life.
The state championship game in 2007, This was a big game. I remember that game because I wasn't there.
Went to the locker room, and he was in there setting out the uniforms like he always does before we're getting ready to leave. And it was evident that he had a stroke. And we're all trying to get him to go to the hospital. And the bus was getting ready to leave in about 2 hours. And he would not sit down until those uniforms were put out.
And Coach Bakke and I just sat down with him in the locker room and said, "We're sorry, but you're not going to be able to go. We need to take you to the hospital." And we all cried.
That was, to me, one of the hardest moments that I've ever had to go through. It just seemed so cruel, the timing of it.
It was one of the bittersweet moments of his coaching career. They had such a good team that year, and the boys were so dedicated and had been winning so much and were obviously poised.
We were playing well. We were going to win that tournament. We were going to win. And he knew it, and I knew it, and the players knew it.
The assistant coaches, Matt Bakke and Mark Counts, carried on in a great fashion.
Coach Peters told me, Coach Bakke, "I trust you. I have complete confidence in you. Take them up there, do what we've planned, and we'll be okay."
He had installed all the schemes that we were executing. It was just a matter of us continuing to do what he had put in place. And so Coach Bakke and I kept looking at each other saying, "We can't screw this up. Don't screw this up."
And he would talk to them on the phone up there before each game and tell them, remind them of what strategy they had planned. And they executed it. They were just superb.
Before the last game, the state game, I talked to him on the phone, and I said, any words of advice to the guys? He said, "It's time to play." And so it was everything had been done, and now it was up to them to play, and they played.
And the boys really I never really got the sense that they felt the pressure of Coach Peters not being there. They were living in the moment, playing in the games, and enjoying every minute of it.
My son John would call on the phone at the end of each quarter and tell us what was going on. And it was a big thrill to get that final call saying that we'd won the championship.
Of course, everybody in the room cried because they won. We could hear them in the background of the telephone yelling, "Jerry, Jerry, Jerry."
And the 2007 Division II TSSAA state champions, Memphis University School. Their record 25-9.
In some ways, the best measure of a coach is what they do when I'm not there to tell them what to do. And I think that was a perfect example of that. He had trained his coaches, he had trained his players, and they were able to go up and execute what he wanted them to do the way he taught them.
I remember the remark Matt Bakke made, which was, "We didn't win the games or the championship for him. We won the championship because of him."
And we got a telephone call, "Can you roll him in his wheelchair downstairs?" I said, "Well, of course." The bus pulled up.
The team bus coming back from Nashville stopped at St. Francis Hospital before they returned to MUS, and they came up to the lobby and met me down there and presented me with the championship trophy.
In the history of the school, there's probably not been a more excited group of boys to go in and present that trophy to Coach at that time. It was really a moving thing.
He couldn't talk well that evening, but he asked me to tell him that he knew they could do it. And he was proud of them, and he would see them very soon.
The key player on the team was a guy named Elliot Cole. And Elliot scored 30 points in the game. And I'd always felt that Elliot would be a great player. And I used to tell him when he was a little kid, a 7th grader, an 8th grader, I said, someday you'll lead the parade. And I pulled him over to the side and whispered it in his ear, you led the parade.
That was, if you're a coach, we probably should have had a movie of that, because that was a real life Hoosiers kind of moment. I mean, you don't see that very often.
Can you imagine any other team in the country, any other high school, where if the head coach is in the hospital, the assistant coaches and the players are able to go function at the biggest event of the year without, their leader's guidance? I think that said more about Coach Peters than if he was there almost.
It really speaks to the way he coaches. He coaches, as I said, to prepare his team for the game. And then when the game starts, it's pretty much up to them.
There's so much preparation in the gym. There's so much preparation in practice to get ready for that moment so that those young men could execute under pressure, that his team was extremely well prepared even without his being there, because in essence he was there.
When a situation like that, where Dad has been so dedicated to his team and the school and so forth, and then they finally get an opportunity to go to the state, and then this happens, I think it makes everybody kind of question some things. And Dad's response to me, at least, was that, there are a lot of people out there that have a lot worse problems than I do right now.
It was just a big season coming to a climax.
Coach Peters was a little intimidating. And so I don't think many mothers, kind of went to Coach Peters and asked sort of personal things about their boys. But one time, I can't remember what I asked him, but I remember what he said. He said, "Francis, quit worrying so much and get a life." I thought, there's just a lot of freedom in that advice. It was a short conversation, but it actually was quite helpful.
I'll never forget, I guess in 1998 or 99, we embarked on the capital campaign entitled The Doors for New Opportunities, where we were going to rebuild the upper school and the campus center. And Coach Peters and Barbara Crippen had been named co-chairs of the faculty division. And one afternoon, Ellis Haywood and I made the pitch to all of the faculty. And when we had finished, Coach Peters said, "Could I say a few words?" And he came forth and he said, I'll tell you what this campaign is all about. It's really important to the school. I can't tell you what MUS has meant to my life. And in order to really support this fully, I'm going to pledge 1 year's salary. And the jaws were dropping around the auditorium. There wasn't a dry eye. And then Coach Peters, in only his inimitable way, looked over those horn-rimmed glasses and said, "I didn't say what year's salary."
But then they had this conference center down in Tunica where they would hold like coaches like Coach K from Duke and all those big college coaches would come down and give clinics, and he and his assistants would go from here for the weekend. And one time I remember saying, "Well, who's going with you this time?" He said, "Oh, I've got some people going with me." Well, I was not at home when he left, but he left me a note. The note said, "Ruth, gone to Tunica with Trixie. We're staying at the Grand. I'll be back Sunday." I couldn't stop laughing.
Mr. Mike Gunn, who's a math teacher here and an administrator, was going to get Coach Peters' office because Coach Peters was leaving an administrative job. And so they were sitting around the office talking, and he asked Coach Peters, he goes, "Hey, that's that computer over there in the corner." He said, "How many times have you used that computer? How many times have you turned that on?" And Coach looked at him, he turned and looked at the computer, and he went up and he flipped the switch on. He said, "Once."
he liked me, which is kind of a funny thing. He would catch me in the hall, and I didn't see him coming, and he'd come up behind me, and he'd go, Marius? And you knew his voice. And I'd jump out of my skin. And every time I think about him coming up behind me, you know, and saying my name, he'd make me jump, but he never did anything to me.
One of my greatest thrills of knowing Coach Peters was when we were in Carbondale at a tournament. And I knew I had arrived as a parent on his squad when he allowed me to be the one that washed the socks and the jocks. And that was huge for him to allow me to do that. So, because he taught them how to dress properly, how to shower properly, all those things. And I knew it was an awesome responsibility I had been given that night in the hotel that we were all staying in.
Coach Peters wasn't as hung up on the 1,000th win as all the rest of us were. He just goes about it quietly. You win 990, then you win 991, and you just keep on going. Oh yeah, well, it's going to be 1,000. Well, we started hearing from all over the country that this is a rarity.
Only 11 coaches in the country have ever won 1,000 games.
That was a great night, a big celebration, and just felt so unique to have guys who had contributed to that 1,000 wins from such a long span of classes.
Is Troca Leslie here?
I hear it, Coach.
Also here is Norris Fox and Danny Calvin. They are our two captains this year. 2012 for the 1,000th victory. Troll was the captain of the 1964-65 team, which recorded win number 1.
As you know, to win 20 games in a basketball season is really a big accomplishment. That's always a good year. And to do it, have to do it for 50 years to get 1,000 wins is just unbelievable.
I don't think each one of those, he wasn't concentrating on, okay, we've got to win this game. It was more, let's do everything right as basketball players and prepare ourselves day in and day out in practice. And the byproduct, here we are, years later, is 1,000 wins.
With 1,000 wins, he has 1,000 lessons that he's taught all of us, you know, and those are going to last a lot more than the wins.
It was just so touching to him to look up there and see all those former young men, now heads of business. They took time off from their lives to come down here and share that.
I mean, there was a guy sitting next to me that had driven nonstop from Lexington, Virginia, and planned to be there till they won.
I remember last spring talking to Jerry about this season. I said, Jerry, how important is 1,000 wins to you? And he sat back in the chair and in his usual way said, I think it's important for the school. It's really not about him in his mind. It's about MUS. Everything he's done for the greater good of the school.
The reason most of those alumni came back for that 1,000 wins was not because of the basketball game, not because of what they learned about basketball. It was about what they learned about success in life. That's what he taught all of us. That's why we all came back.
Well, I would like to say that in some way I hope they've benefited from being in basketball, from being in the class. I hope it's helped make them a better person. I hope that they felt that being a part of a team was important.
In retrospect, the first thing I would tell Jerry Peters is thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I can't think of other words. Thank you.
I'd say thank you very much, Coach. Job well done.
I would say, Coach Peters, you are an inspiration to all of us. The lives you have touched are amazing. You have been a friend and a mentor and a coach. I've said many times, MUS is really a school for a lifetime. And if MUS is a school for a lifetime, you're a coach for a lifetime.
You didn't just change the institution, you changed every boy that came through the institution.
I appreciate everything he's done for the school. I've been around here for a while, and I truly love him.
You made all of us better than we thought we could ever be.
I would tell him thank you and congratulations on just a wonderful career. And I'm sorry to see people like him go because my son's coming up.
I'd say, Coach, you lived a good life and you have influenced hundreds and hundreds of boys in the right way so that today they're good men. And they, their hats are off to you at this point.
I just say thanks. Thanks for being who you are and what you've been to the school and everyone associated with it.
I remember one time in a meeting, we used to have these meetings for various reasons all the time. He said, nobody's indispensable. I said, that's true, Coach, but some people are irreplaceable, and you're one of them. And I think he is irreplaceable.
You've often said that your report card is your former players and students long after they leave the school. You've been eminently successful.
Thank you very much for your friendship and your warm, caring, and getting across the notion to me that that what I did mattered. That made a tremendous difference to me, and I will never ever forget it.
What would I say to him? Probably the same thing I said to him the night he won his 1,000th game. My friend, you've done the work. You paid a price. You've done everything that you've been asked to do, and you'll be blessed for it.
Every day I can hear you in what I say to the young men I'm in charge of in my program. And I would hope that it's a compliment to you, Coach Peters, that that because of all the many lessons and all of the many character traits I've learned, that I use them day in and day out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done, not just for me, for all the players that you've coached, for the school, for your family. Your dedication and commitment are absolutely unparalleled, and job well done.
Thank you for doing the right thing, for teaching that lesson to my child by the way you demonstrated it and the way you lived every day.
We just thank you for being who you are and for just the abiding influence that you've had on our boys. We're just a large group of grateful, grateful parents.
Thank you for everything you've done for me personally. And I can't express it in words, really. It's to explain to him the influence that he's had on my life it's unbelievable.
I would say thank you for his wisdom, and thank you for his leadership, but most of all, his friendship.
I would say I love you. Thank you for being a great father, a great husband, coach, teacher, mentor. Thank you for the thousands of lives that you've touched throughout so many years at MUS.
We grew up the son of an educator in a small home with 4 boys, and we never once thought we didn't have everything that we needed in life. And they were just tremendous parents, and I would just say thanks.
I don't know that he knows that we feel the way we do in terms of looking to him as a role model just for how we behave, how we do things, how we raise our children, we just don't talk a whole lot about that. We generally talk about basketball. But I would thank him for setting that example and being there.
I think one of the main reasons he stayed at MUS so long, early on anyway, was because of us, and he wanted us to go to MUS and have this experience, and so he made some sacrifices for us, and that's hard to put in words how much that means to us.
What would I say to Coach Peters? I love you. You know, I mean, what he did for us was pour himself into us. I'm just thinking about being a coach, a rec team myself right now, and to actually deal with the tensions that come from trying to meet high expectations as a coach is so hard. It's so much easier just to give in. And Coach Peters took on stress and took on, sleepless nights and took on the hard work of meticulous preparation for us. And it just meant so much. I mean, there's nothing more than you want as a growing adult, as a kid trying to grow up, than to have somebody pour themselves into you like that.
Well, I'm glad I was along for the ride. If my husband were a brain surgeon, I wouldn't be with him in the operating room. If my husband sold insurance, I wouldn't be with him out there brokering. But when he's basketball coach, I can be a part of it all the time. So I was his greatest fan all these years, his very greatest fan. And I wouldn't take anything for the long ride.
I guess I have had a very simple life. I don't play golf. I don't fish. I don't hunt. I don't play cards. It sounds like a very boring life. I don't use alcohol. I don't use tobacco. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but my teaching and my coaching have pretty much consumed my time. I have my faith, I have my family, and then I have my work. That pretty much consumes me.